Fuck, I blanked. Okay,
Here
we're
we
back.
are. Here we go, baby. We're here. We're in this now.
Okay. We're here. We're going. We're all squared away. We got a few questions that have rolled in from some fans, some people that enjoy our stuff, and we're here to answer them.
We love it. Send all your questions. We'll answer them because this is fun for us. I love it.
This is phenomenal. Like, it's something I didn't think about. It's a few questions that are very good questions. Maybe I'll put up like a little shout, like the question with his name, because I don't have his name off my head, but just so you guys could see, I could show appreciation for you guys.
Yeah, man. This is cool for us, and we're happy to answer the questions. I think they are great questions, too.
They are. And I say we just get right into it because there's a lot to unpack with these questions, and they could take us far. So the first question we got was essentially, if Fedor could have worked something out with the UFC in the 2009-2010 time frame, could he have been champion in that era of fighters in the heavyweight division? RJ, you want to lead this one off?
Sure. The short answer, yes. Okay. First of all, Fedor just retired this year. So 2009, I mean, what was that, 14 years ago? And the guy's still put on, he finished off his career. He went to Ryzen, he went to Bellator, after Strikeforce, after Pride. This guy fought for a very long time into his 40s. And let me just say, I mean, he's gotten finishes throughout his career. His very last fight in Bellator, his retirement fight, was a title fight. Everybody brings up the 2009 era Fedor because he had a string of losses against, and this is the big part, is against guys who would eventually be in the UFC heavyweight division. Now, as we just kind of looked into it for a second, and the top 10 heavyweights in the UFC division, Fedor already has wins over 80% of these guys. He fought almost all these guys in Pride. Later in his career, he fought and finished Frank Mir later in his career, like the Nogueiras, just a lot of these guys that were big in the UFC at that time. Yes, Fedor can hang with any of those guys, like without a doubt. Real quick, right? Like Fedor's had like 40 something, almost 50 fights.
He's up there, yeah.
I want to say it's like almost 50 fights, or at least 40, and over 30 of them were stoppage wins, whether he submitted the guy or knocked the guy out. He's always been a smaller and almost pudgier heavyweight. He probably could have fought at light heavyweight, let's be honest. And the other thing to note is when he was fighting the best guys in the world, there was no USADA in sight. These guys were all roided out of their minds, every last one of them. And Fedor came in there with his reach lack and knocked these guys out or submitted them. So to think that he couldn't hang in those days, yeah, Fedor could have easily been a UFC champion. And let's look at his losses real quick. Fabricio Verdum, only one of the greatest heavyweight submission artists in the world ever of all time. He got caught with a submission. Like, okay, the guy won 30 something fights in a row. And then all of a sudden it's like, he's a hack because he got submitted by Verdum. No, I don't think so. Right? Come on, man. Then he has a doctor stoppage against Bigfoot. Doctor stoppage that he wasn't knocked out. He didn't quit.
Doctor stoppage.
He was a doctor stoppage. Tell him it was a doctor stoppage. Yo, yeah, for real. Shout out to Mystic Mac. But a doctor stoppage, he had some bad cuts. It's like, what are you going to do? That's part of the game. So that happened. Very unfortunate. And then he got clipped by an H-bomb. Dan Henderson clipped him, and, it is what it is, bro. Some of these guys, you can't let these losses define his entire career. Fedor is a legend. He is on the heavyweight Mount Rushmore. He is at the GOAT's table. Fedor Emelianenko, the last emperor, will easily go down in history as one of the best heavyweights to ever do it. My answer, do I think he could be a champion in the UFC during that era? Yes, I do.
I mean, how do I even follow that up?
What do you think?
I got no real argument against everything that you said. Everyone's going to take that string of losses and glorify it to make it something bigger than it is, to try and make an argument for, he would have gotten washed in the UFC or this, that, and the other, which is total nonsense, as you just pretty much described. You look at the top 10 in the UFC in 2009 when this whole thing was going down. Fedor had wins over almost half of the top 10. And, I mean, he could have beaten the other half that he didn't beat if he went to the UFC. So to think he couldn't have been champion is absurd. And I would love to hear another side of the story of people who disagree with us and think he couldn't have been a UFC champion and what they bring to the table for evidence in that matter. But I don't think there's very much evidence to support that claim of him not being good enough or not being able to become a champion. If you look at his run in Pride, I mean, he was fighting these guys when they were, as you said, pre-USADA. They were juiced out of their mind, and they were killers, man.
Yeah.
He was fighting these guys when they were coming off of 5-fight knockout streaks, just killing everybody. And Fedor just made them look average. He pretty much made them all look average. He did have some adversity to overcome in some of those fights, but he did just that. He overcame all the adversity, and he really just dominated Pride in their heyday when every one of these guys was a scary dude to get into the ring with. He's one of the greats, as you said. He's in the GOAT discussion for greatest mixed martial artist of all time. He has to be up there. I mean, he's beaten these guys. Mirko Krokop, who was scary as ever in the Pride days. Who else? You got Mark Coleman, who he just bullied for 2 fights.
Coleman, Randleman, Rampage, like the list goes on.
Keith Haring, yeah, keep going. Like you could go all day.
It's honestly like the fact that some people don't put him in their GOAT list or heavyweight greats list because he was never in the UFC. It's laughable, man. It's nonsense. This guy, look at the Pride rule set in Pride. They stomped people in the head when they were on the ground. Like, that's the era that this guy made his legendary run in. I mean, was it Kevin Randleman literally picked him up and powerbombed him on his neck? And then not only did he like survive that, but he came back to finish the fight and win. Give me a break, man. The only fight, if I really had to think about that 2009 era of heavyweights in the UFC, the only one that like I would maybe kind of raise an eyebrow to would be Cain Velasquez. Cain is, in my opinion, one of the greatest heavyweights of all time. And, you know, he had the cardio for days. He would have had the size on Fedor. Cain eventually took the belt from Brock, I believe, and, and had his run. But, so that would have made an interesting fight. A lot of people bring up Randy Couture. Obviously, Couture fought for a very long time, and he was a very successful champion. Let's not forget, though, Couture was more successful at light heavyweight, only coming to heavyweight later in his career. So, like, I don't really think that would have been a great argument. Fedor can hang. Let's just, I can't. I don't understand how it's only people that probably never watched Pride and like just think that, oh, those guys are cans. Those guys are not cans. Those guys, it's the top 10 UFC fighters on steroids. That's who those guys were. And Fedor knocked them all out and submitted them. I mean, the guy's a many time world champion for Sambo. He's a judo champion. He's won belts in different MMA organizations, like fighting in the wrong weight class, probably. Stone cold killer. You could never get an emotion out of that guy. He was so much fun to watch. And, yes. The answer is yes. He could have been the champ.
It's absolutely yes. I just had a thought pop into my head as you were like talking about that. And one argument I could potentially see for he would have lost in the UFC would be that transitioning from a pride ring with ropes to a cage in the UFC with cage wrestling and the heavy wrestlers in the top 10 in 2009 with the champion being Brock. I could see an argument where they're like, oh, he's not going to switch well from the pride rule set to the UFC cage with the cage rule sets. But then he goes out and thumps that with going to Strikeforce, going to Bellator, going to all of these other organizations later on. And just doing everything he does, but in a cage and proving that theory pretty much wrong. So he would have developed his cage wrestling. He would have figured out the rule set pretty quickly as he did. And that was just a thought I had, but I pretty much just negated that theory.
No, but I like that thought. I mean, the rule set's different. The environment's different. Going from a ring to a cage. Yes, those things would have played a factor. Ultimately, though, I mean, let's say he came over to the UFC and lost his first one. Does that mean he's never going to be able to win again? I mean, the guy, like we just said, after 2009, the guy fought for 14 more years. He could have had plenty of time in the rest of his career to build another win streak, to get back in the top whatever rankings and get a championship fight. I mean, the guy was unstoppable for years. So just because he, if he got a couple bumps and bruises, maybe the UFC heavyweights would have given him a hard time. I'm not saying he would have ran through them and just, went undefeated in the UFC. That's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying he is just as good, if not better, than a lot of those guys. He already has wins over him. What are we talking? Come on.
He's already beat him.
He finished those guys.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know. I got nothing to say. Yes, he absolutely could have and probably would have been a UFC champion if he made that switch. No matter who you put in front of him, he would have found a way to win the fight and been a dominant champion like he was in Pride, like he was everywhere else. So Fedor's one of the GOATs, man. If you don't know, then shame on you. You should know. Go watch some Pride fights. Go watch all those back in the day fights. And you'll find out very quickly that he's in the GOAT conversation.
Yeah, The Last Emperor highlight reel on YouTube. Go check it out. The answer is yes. Next question.